Chapter 5, Children, Teachers, and Creative Activities. When thinking about the developmental level of a child, we are going to consider 4 main areas of growth. The first being physical, which encompasses fine motor and gross motor. The second being social, which encompasses coping skills, interacting, functioning in large and small groups. Emotional skills, which also deals with coping, behaviors like and expressive emotions like shyness, anger, confidence, and elation. And the fourth area is cognitive and intellectual skills, which covers thinking, reasoning, basic concepts, counting, things like ABCs, problem solving, processing language, both expressive and receptive language. When we consider the child, we need to recognize that there are individual differences among the same age children. The developmental levels will vary. In your textbook, you can learn about why they will vary and how they will vary. Children will have strengths and weaknesses in all domains, and those should be considered when you're planning activities and learning projects. Abilities and skills. Usually the ability is related to a child's developmental level, so you cannot assume that all children in a 4-year-old class are going to have the same skills and abilities because their developmental levels will be different. You want to plan to the child's ability level rather than just going by their age. If you feel like it, you can answer this question for yourself as to why is that important? Why is it important to plan for ability levels rather than going on a child's age and assuming that because the child is 4, they can do this lesson? A term that you should be very familiar with by now, and you would expect to hear in all areas of early childhood education and in classes related to early childhood education, is developmentally appropriate practice. This is the set of core ideas that are the basis of early childhood education contained in a statement adopted by the NAEYC Governing Board and published as part of the book Developmentally Appropriate Practice in Early Childhood Programs. In their position statement in 1997, they started off with, to teach young children, teachers must do several things. First, they need to meet children where they are developmentally. They want to help each child reach challenging yet achievable goals. Recognize that the challenge will vary for each child. And there should be intentionality in all the early childhood practices that they do. Classroom design and curriculum is intentional on the teacher's part and not left to chance. When thinking about a developmentally appropriate classroom, the characteristics might include these. The teacher is in charge of the environment, but it is organized so that children have choices. Choices that provide hands-on learning, balance between teacher-directed and child-chosen experiences, maximum interaction among children. It's almost like the teacher sets the stage and supports children as they move through the classroom. Developmentally appropriate practice calls for kids to choose from a variety of activities, that children are both physically and mentally active, that children can choose to work individually or in small groups, but they should always be doing some of both. Kids are provided concrete learning activities with relevant materials to their experiences that they've had in their life. That's going to require a teacher to know her students very well, to know what kinds of experiences the children are having, what's happened in the past, so that they can draw on those and build with them as they're in their classroom. When we think about differentiated instruction, the definition is providing different types of learning experiences and environments to suit individual needs. So you kind of want to think about what works for each child. And lessons and activities should connect for each child. Knowing your students is the only way to achieve this. Teachers need to know where their students are developmentally, emotionally, physically, cognitively, and they need to know their students in a world that their parents can provide insight on as well. So what are the kids like at home, not just at school? And that requires a lot of homeschool connection and really getting involved with your students. Some characteristics of differentiated instruction are similar to developmentally appropriate practices. The characteristics include child-centered approach, with children having choices. Similarities and differences are accepted by the teacher. The teacher is the coordinator, not just the provider of information. Children and teachers may work together. You have a variety of group sizes and independent work time. Flexibility. Flexibility is key in your schedule, of your room arrangement, of assessment, and your instructional strategies. Being flexible will allow you to welcome children's differences and then plan accordingly. Your assessments will guide instruction. They should be ongoing and drive your planning. You don't want to set a plan and then assess and say, oh, well, some kids didn't meet the mark, but this is what I've planned for, so we're just going to go with it. You want to make sure that your assessments and what you're learning about your students is driving the planning that you're doing. When we think about multiple intelligences, we need to understand that these are correlated with differentiated learning. It's part of a developmentally appropriate curriculum. It provides strategies for meeting individual needs, and it was developed by Howard Gardner. There are actually 8 ways that we all have to be smart. Based off of those 8 intelligences, once you learn about them, you might start to recognize some of your students as being intelligent in one area, for example, in music smart, over person smart. And by knowing those things, you'll be better able to plan and recognize your strengths and weaknesses in your students. Some of the multiple intelligences are word smart, logic smart, picture smart, music smart, body smart, person smart, self smart, and nature smart. In your textbook, there's an outline of the different things that you might find someone who's picture smart doing when they grow up, someone who's self smart when they grow up, what interests they might have, and the characteristics that go along with each of those you can find in your textbook as well. You may not come into contact with a child with special needs as you work in the classrooms of daycare centers, preschools, and various areas of babysitting, for example. But it's always important to just have a small background to know what to do and what ways you can adapt instruction for children with special needs. You want to make sure that it correlates with differentiated instruction because at its heart, differentiated instruction addresses the same thing that education for children with special needs encompasses, which is everybody's different, everybody's going to learn at a different pace, and so instruction should be a little more individualized. You want to meet each child at their developmental level, regardless of how low it may be. Tailor the environment to their strengths and weaknesses. Increase challenges in manageable steps. For example, if you're teaching a child to cut with scissors, or even a group of children, and some of the children can cut out a circle without having a line or anything to follow, but the child that you know has special needs may not be able to cut a straight line, you might need to offer some help or some guidance or special scissors that will help that child cut. Different ways to adapt the activity so that that child can participate as well. You would also want to consider adapting your schedule, materials, tasks, and assessment for that child. One highlighted approach that the textbook covered is the Reggio Emilia approach. In this approach, children express ideas and learning through art media. Children document their own progress in their own words, sometimes the teachers as well. The activities should stem from the children's interests and ideas. The teachers may make the comments and help to illustrate what the child is trying to convey by taking notes, videos, or written comments as well after the children tell them what they are doing. Children guide their own learning by what they're interested in for as long as they are interested in it. There's a link on this slide that may not work as a link if you click on it, but if you're able to highlight it and go to this video, it'll show you a brief video about the Reggio Emilia approach, and it's very, very interesting, and it's a really neat program to see. So if you could take the time to look at this YouTube video down here and either copy and paste it or write down the web address and go to it. It's really, really worth it and interesting. This slide was part of a group activity when I taught this class in a face-to-face setting. However, if you would like to try to come up with some neat ideas for this, you can just jot them down here and use your brain in a different way and maybe think of ways to adapt this activity. The following is about Bloom's taxonomy. This is a classification system that was discussed in Chapter 5, used to design and categorize instruction and questions. What our goal is to move children up this ladder to higher level thinking. So at the very bottom of the ladder, you start with knowledge, which is recall of data. So that might be when you ask a child to list, describe, locate, or find something. When you move up the ladder to comprehension, you start using words like explain, interpret, and compare. As we go to application, which is when you learn to use that knowledge in a new way, you might have students show, illustrate, or use the knowledge that you're looking for. Analysis has you distinguishing between facts and inferences, so you might have students compare and contrast. Synthesis involves putting parts together for a whole, like creating, inventing, planning, and constructing. And evaluation involves judgments about the value of ideas and things, so you might ask students to judge, select, choose, or to verify something. So attention span is something that desperately needs to be considered when you're working with young children, because the attention spans and the activities that you plan should kind of go together. When you think about toddlers, you might not realize it, but their attention span, what you would expect would be about 2 to 3 minutes to an activity or to a toy or something that they're interested in. Now, that's not saying that that's all you should ever expect a toddler to pay attention for 2 to 3 minutes. Sometimes kids will hone in on something and spend a lot of time on it, but you don't want to set the bar with an activity that's going to take 20 minutes to complete and then find yourself feeling frustrated when the children, in 3 or 4 minutes are taking off the other direction. And attention span definitely increases with age. By 6 years old, what they're suggesting is that the attention span is about 15 minutes. I think that's a little low personally, but again, kids are different, and you just want to make sure that you know your students really well and what they're capable of when it comes to attention span, so that you're not planning too much for them that then causes them to lose focus. Some things that you might look for to see if a child is losing focus includes turning their heads, yawning, fidgeting, wiggling, getting up and leaving the activity is a big clue that you've lost them. And so you want to consider, what will those things tell you when children are losing attention? What does that tell you about the activities that you've planned as a teacher? And how can teachers increase attention to more routine activities? What are some strategies that you might use? After reading the book, you should be able to answer those 2 questions pretty thoroughly and explain what you would do to get kids to pay attention a little more and for a little bit longer. When we think about activity patterns, you want to begin with familiar or favorite things. Like, you can start an activity by gaining their attention with a favorite song or a finger play that they might know. You might want to review other related activities. Have kids act out a song, a story, or a finger play that can then tie into the activity that you have planned. And then when you're introducing new and different things, you can find a way almost always to tie them into something that's a familiar thing to a child or that's a favorite thing to a child. You can always make that bridge so that they still are curious and interested and right there with you paying attention. Transitions are a part of every early childhood program, whether it's an in-home daycare, a Head Start class in a public school setting, a daycare center, a church-run nursery. Transitions happen all the time, and they should not really be chaotic or fast-paced. And after reading Chapter 5, you should be able to explain why that's the case. Why should transitions happen on a little slower level? Why do you want to give warnings or have a picture schedule that illustrates your activities for the day so the children can follow along? Why are those things important? Something that teachers might use for transitions might be music, and chances are if a classroom is getting started for the morning and kids are coming in and putting their backpacks away and getting settled. You've heard a familiar song or the cleanup song. Everybody knows the cleanup song, and a lot of times that's played when it's time to clean up and come to a center time or a snack time or time to go to the bathroom. Songs and routine clapping or a certain signal that will give children a good predictor of what's coming next. Some places and classrooms will use passports for transitions between centers. That might be game pictures, or game pieces, like photograph little passport pictures. There's lots of other things that can be used, and you can start generating some ideas in your heads based off of either your own personal experiences when you were in preschool and kindergarten, or something that you've seen if you work in the field of what different types of things kids might take to indicate a desire to go to a certain center, or to let a teacher or another friend know that Susie has arrived at the housekeeping center, and so here is her little flower that has her picture on it that goes into the flower pot at the housekeeping center, or something along those lines. Things like that help children to transition from area to area and from activity to activity. This is a sample schedule using pictures to illustrate and to explain to kids what's going to happen throughout the day. When I taught, I would have a very similar schedule, and then after every activity, we would come back to circle, and as a class, we would talk about what we had just done, whether it was being at circle time, and then we're going to go to choice time and outdoors and story time, and if we had just had outdoor time, we might come back to circle. All the other things up until outdoors would have been removed, and then we would talk about it. What did you guys do outside? What was your most fun thing today? Who did you play with? Okay, well, outdoor time is all finished, so now we're going to take this off our schedule and drop it in the all done box. And now it's time for story time. And that kind of helps children see the passage of time, understand that something is now complete that they were doing, and it's no longer a choice, like we're not going to go back outside right now, and this is what it's time for. And then they see the picture of the teacher reading to the students. Pictures and schedules like this are a great way to help kids who aren't quite reading yet and who really don't have a really good grasp of the passage of time figure that out.